Lander Barton decided to forego the 2025 NFL draft and didn't enter the transfer portal despite rumors about BYU trying to lure him over to Provo. How big is it that Utah was able to keep Barton? And we're still reacting and in shock over Craig Smith's early dismissal. All that and more on a Friday edition of Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first view and listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time joining our show, make sure you like and subscribe. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by the host of the Runnin Hoops Podcast, Andrew Crowley. Andrew, really appreciate you making the time to stop on. And Andrew, this is something, the Utah basketball news is something that's crazy. We'll get to that in a moment. But there was something earlier on in the offseason I wanted to bring up because I feel like it's worth talking about that kind of went under the radar. We got the NFL Combine going on this week, so I've been drawing a lot of headlines and everything. So with the NFL Combine, there was one player that a lot of NFL scouts were hoping would be in attendance. That's Lander Barton. Don't believe me? Look up Lander Barton NFL draft. He is all over mock drafts from earlier in the year. Just a few weeks ago, Field Yates had him as a top 5 linebacker. So the fact that he's coming back to Utah, and there were even rumors a few weeks ago that BYU was trying to lure him and some other of the top Utah players over their roster. The fact that Utah was able to keep a premier player like Lander is massive.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks for having me on again. I appreciate being here with you. And Lander took a little bit of heat. It feels like last year from the fans, missed tackles, playing out of position, things like that.
I gave him heat too, so I will be open up to
that. What's that?
I gave him heat too.
I was
also hard on him.
But it's always good to have that level of experience back. Especially at the linebacker position, and with some of the other additions that they made on the defensive side, just kind of having a steady hand back there. Somebody that knows this defense can call the plays and all of that stuff. I think he's probably poised for a big bounce back year in Salt Lake.
It definitely feels like that. I think the expectation was that correct. Well, obviously the expectation, Karene Reed and him were going to be together. I think they asked Lander to do other things when Karene got hurt, and I think he just struggled in that role at times. I think he was doing too much thinking at times and not enough just attacking and playing as free as he had in some of his past years, because I did not think last year was his best year. But he is a guy that we know what he can be. He's one of the higher recruits Utah's ever gotten, a 4-star guy. He still had a team best 72 tackles a year ago, 5.5, 6 passes defended, 2 INTs, 4 pass breakups, and 1 fumble recovery too. And you just look over the years, like 34 tackles last year, 46 his freshman year too. Like, this is a guy who is still has that potential to be an elite player in the NFL. The size, the strength, like there's just so many things I look at for him and I go, hey, I do feel like that he's going to be an elite linebacker at the next level. And having a guy at his caliber and talents back, when you lose in 1 year, Karene Reed, guys like Giannia and Cameron Calhoun, they lost a lot. Having a returner like Lander back, who's definitely going to be a big leader on this defense too, is massive for Utah.
Yeah, and if he can get some help, from those rush ends, from those, the kind of the first line of defense, if he can get some help there, I think his tackles are going to go way up, and he's going to be in position to make plays like he did against UCF down the stretch last year, where I think he had that pick 6, right? Not the streak, but it was a pick 6 that really helped them win the game.
Yes, it wasn't. Did you say UCF? I think it was Smith Snowden had the pick.
Okay.
Or Zamaya Vaughn might have had another one too. Maybe he had one in that game too. But I know at one point last year, I feel like he definitely had an interception.
Yeah.
He only had the 2. Yeah.
I think he was the one that extended the streak, but I could be wrong on that.
No, you might be right on that. Yeah. I think you just, No, I think that is true. But either, I feel like he's going to be a guy who's going to continue to do that next year, which is exciting. And I think one thing you got to love about Lander too, Andrew, is the loyalty. You heard rumors about Smith Snowden, Lander Barton. I feel like there's another one I'm even forgetting in there, but I know, and Giannia Tanavasa, another guy that BYU was talking to and hoping that, hey, they would enter the portal and try to get them over to BYU. Those were a lot of rumors and reports that we were hearing. The fact that Lander remained at Utah is another big thing for this team. Have that loyalty. We know about the Barton legacy with that family. So much success at Utah from his sister with volleyball, to all his brothers on the football field too. It just feels right that Lander's returning to Utah too.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting, honestly, to have that, have a legacy family for Utah, and to, look, it's unrestricted free agency at the end of every season, right? And, you can't blame anybody for, changing their situation with more money. I think maybe the other guy you're thinking of was Cam Calhoun. He jumped in the portal after saying he was coming back. So it's nice to see somebody kind of, stick to their guns, stick to their loyalty, even though I know that it's not as simple as that, but it's still nice.
Yeah, I love the point you brought up too. Like, I think so often we get frustrated at the athletes, and that frustration to me is fair when they say they're going to stay and then they don't. Like, being frustrated by that, I get that from fans. But I think it's also important to remember, like, when a guy just decides, hey, had a good year, I'm going to go at, like what Carson Ryan did, like deciding, hey, I'm just going to go enter the portal. And yeah, he went to BYU. But like, in today's world with NIL and everything too, like, the players have the option to make whatever choice they feel is best for them. If you want to be mad at the system that has just made this so crazy. I mean, we're going to talk about some NIL and transfer portal stuff for the men's basketball program that they've dealt with in a little bit here, but that is something that's just huge, having Lander back. And I feel like if Utah wants to accomplish their goals in 2025, I think Lander Barton's going to have a type of season similar to what Devin Lloyd meant to this defense when Utah first broke through and won a Pac-12 title back in 2021, their first ever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for sure he's going to be a see ball, get ball kind of guy for Utah. And I think, to your point, like, he's one of these guys that does find himself in the right place at the right time more often than not. And if, they can, withstand, not having major injuries and things like that, I think he's poised for just a massive season.
Totally agree. I felt like there were times last year too where, because of the Corene Reed injury too, like, he was playing out of position, as we talked about. And then once Corene was back, like, there were games where I remember thinking, like, that's Lander Barton, like that guy that we think has the potential to eventually be a first round type of player, like just potentially be in that conversation. He's still there. Will he end up being that a year from now? I don't know, but he has the potential to be it. This is a guy, I think he's the best player in Utah's front seven right now, Andrew. Any pushback there? Would you agree with that?
Off the top of my head, that's probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, Logan Fano was the only other guy that kind of popped in there. But I felt like Fano, even last year, was maybe this team's third best defensive end when everyone was healthy. Really like Logan Fano. But and defensively overall, like, it's Lander Barton, Smith Snowden, Teo Johnson here, like the three best defenders that Utah is going to have next season. And maybe there could be a Dallas Vakalahi, the freshman. Maybe he surprises us in there too. But like, Lander's going to be the guy that everyone's looking for. I expect him to be a preseason first-team all-conference guy. And I do expect him to have the type of year that we know he's capable of. It's cool that he's at Utah for 4 years now too. It seemed like he wanted to stay. There was a lot of NFL love and pushes we talked about. Like, it seems like a lot of teams were hoping he'd enter the NFL draft, but he didn't. And he's going to be back with Utah, a great leader to have, just a guy who's so physical. I mean, his profile picture, his neck. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You want to talk about a linebacker? Like, it's honestly an offensive line neck in some ways. But that's the thing. He's that strong and moves as well he does. Keeps himself in really good shape. Like, he is going to have a monster season, I think, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do. Still got a few weeks till we get to see him in action for spring ball, but we do currently still have the men's basketball team in action, despite what's kind of a weird end of the season now that Craig Smith moved on. It's been a crazy week. We want to recap it all and just talk about our thoughts. Now that we are a few days removed from everything, we'll be getting into that in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Fabric. Fabric is here for you because life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term in life insurance and that fits your needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online. Right from your couch, you can be covered under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. Gives you that peace of mind, right? I mean, this is something that you can get, right? You can get and it's affordable coverage too. I mean, you can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. I mean, beyond life insurance, Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. It's all caps, Locked On College. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policy issues by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions too. So make sure you guys head over to Fabric by Gerber Life today and see what they have to offer. Andrew Crowley back with me here. Andrew, talking about what's happened with the Utah men's basketball program. It's still hard to believe. I mean, just like thinking back to the Kansas State wins, like I just didn't see this coming. And I still don't. A few days after, and I don't like it either. As I've said, I totally understand if after the year, when the painting that is the 24-25 Utah men's basketball season is finished, if they said, hey, don't like the direction this is going in, we're going to move on from Craig Smith. I get that. But the fact that this team was picked to finish 16th, was in the 10th spot, just 2 games removed from upsetting a Kansas team that was in the top 25. I know what's happened to Kansas, but I just felt like he deserved the opportunity to see what he could do with this team. And I think that's what still just bugs me about the timing of the firing now that we are a few days removed.
Yeah, we don't have the luxury to be overlooking a win over Kansas, no matter when it comes or how it comes, right? I mean, that would be like back in the Pac-12 days of being like, oh, well, I know we just beat USC, but I mean, come on, they're not. So I mean, I think the timing was curious. Obviously there were reasons for the timing, but yeah, I mean, a surprising and also not surprising move. Yeah. Just given some of the things that have come out since then about it being booster driven and all of those things. But I mean, yeah, you're picked 16th, you're right in the middle right now with an opportunity. I mean, look, it's going to be tough to go win in Tucson. It's going to be tough to win in Provo, but stranger things have happened. I don't think they wanted to give Craig sort of any room to, to show that there were enough improvements for him to come back, quite honestly.
Would you classify the Kansas and Kansas State wins as both top 3 wins on the season?
On the season?
Because I'm going BYU for sure, right?
Yeah. Yeah, probably. I mean, there's not a lot to choose from. I actually think the TCU win on the road was a good win because it was their first. One of the things that I've said all along is that one of my biggest issues with the way that, the schedule was set up for them is they just didn't give themselves any room for error. And so when, you lose the Mississippi State game, you lose the Iowa game, St. Mary's, if you'd been able to get one of those or had a couple of more opportunities in your non-con, like you could get to the NCAA tournament at 9-11 in the Big 12. It's that good a league, right?
Yes.
Cincinnati, they just won tonight. They're 7-10 and people are still talking about them being on the bubble.
Yeah.
So, so those 2 were definitely really good wins. And if they had just given themselves a little bit more opportunity in the non-con, I think they would still be in the mix for the NCAA tournament.
I think it's a great point because there were so early on, especially those missed opportunities against the best teams. I remember being on shows talking about like, hey, we have a chance to maybe be better than we think, but they actually have to beat. There was time they just had to beat a Power 4 team, which was very, very concerning. So you're right, getting that TCU win was massive. But yeah, just like the fact that your 2 wins removed from what we would both agree are at least top 4 wins on the season, and then you're like, oh, 1 loss on the road. And what I've also said earlier in the week, like if you look at the West Coast teams that travel to the East Coast, they don't perform very well on the season. So like, yes, the UCF loss in the vacuum isn't great, but at the same time, Andrew, I just still feel like, hey, let this team come home. Let's see what they can do against a West Virginia at home. And obviously, yes, they had Arizona earlier in the week, so we see how that went. But this is a team that still deserved the chance to try and do something in a neutral site in the tournament. And I thought you made a great point about UCF before we even started recording this show.
Yeah, I was mentioning to you, like, if you look at the 2 rosters, objectively speaking, UCF still had the 3 best players on the court, or 3 of the best, 5, however you want to slice it, right? Keyshawn Hall is an all-conference guy. Darius Johnson's a guy that can get a bucket anytime you need it. And same with Jordan Ivy Curry, who's the guy that Utah kicked the tires on out of the transfer portal in the offseason. And, I think that as fans, we spend a lot of time looking at records and we mistake underachieving teams for bad teams. It's a problem we had in the Pac-12. The talent was always there. These are 4- and 5-star guys that are underachieving. And the problem with that is they'll have a bad record, but they can jump up and get you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with UCF. It's what happened with Oklahoma State. It's what happened with some of these other schools. They've just underachieved, but they're not bad. Not bad teams.
Yeah. They're not at all. And I think, like you said, you make a great point. You talk about they have 3 of the top 5. I was saying I disagree with the timing of the fire. Like, that's where what leads to this firing is, yes, Craig Smith could have made better recruiting decisions at times for me, for sure. There's misses he had throughout his tenure. But it's also fair to say, I've been told for a fact, like, that Utah, from people I trust, that Utah wanted to grab certain players and they didn't have the NIL compensation to meet their asking price too. So now you get the revenue sharing and some things there. And maybe because a lot of the rumors are pointing to a Utah man, maybe that will change, where you're going to see that coming up, they hire a guy and maybe you get a little better funding moving forward as well. Because, yes, I do also believe what's been talked about, a lot of these rumors saying that, hey, or not even rumors, there's reports saying this was booster motivated, which makes sense when you look at how things have kind of played out too, especially Alex Markham talking about the fact that a lot of the boosters wanted Andre Miller last year, he's a name to for sure watch too. But Andrew, I don't think this basketball program has just a Craig Smith problem. This is something that's been going on for a while. I mean, there's people still chasing the 90s. I don't know what the ceiling and idea for this program is. And even the next coach they bring in, I'm not hopefully he can have wins as impressive as top 5 Arizona, BYU a couple times, and even what you just got against Kansas. Once again, I'm not saying they should have kept Craig Smith after this year. I'm just saying the fact that there's problems bigger than just Craig Smith with Utah basketball right now.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you you can go north or south in the state of Utah, and you can find game day atmospheres, support from fans, admin, that just blows what Utah has out of the water. And by the way, jumping back to your NIL point, I think that it's fair to say that Craig's public comments about NIL over the last few weeks and months, I think that really started to sour Mark Harlan on Craig.
Seems like it. Yeah.
You talked about players that they missed out on. Chance McMillian at Texas Tech. That was 100% an NIL situation. Ray J. Dennis the year before when he went to Baylor, 100% an NIL situation. And so you can't just say, look, the resources are there when they're bottom 4th probably in the Big 12. There's got to be a lot more support, just infrastructure support, and some good hires in other areas, not just head coach. Head coach is going to be a big one, right? Head coach is the biggest one. But if you're advising somebody about taking the Utah job, I would want to have some assurances about NIL support, about, other, things that go on in the stadium or in the arena and, travel budgets, stuff like that, right? There's just a lot of things that need to be fixed with this program. Craig took the heat, right? And one of the things I've said on my podcast and other places is, Mark Harlan is losing his shield here, right? I think that the fans that never wanted Craig could continue to focus on Craig when things went wrong. If you let's just say you put an Alex Jensen in that situation, where's the blame going to go if something goes wrong? It's not going to go to Alex Jensen.
Right.
It's not going to go to Andre Miller. It's going to go squarely on Mark Harlan. And so he's got to get the hire right, and he's got to put the structure around him to succeed.
It's absolutely true. I mean, he didn't really get to make a football hire because they're going to go with Morgan Scalley. Craig Smith, it didn't work out. And when you are the athletic director, that goes on your resume. So this is a very important one too. And I will say, it feels like Utah realizes, at least I hope they do, if this is a booster motivated thing, then you also like realize like you have to be part of the solution outside of just like, oh, we got our guy, our hands are off. Like, no, you have to help him build a roster that can compete in the Big 12. We don't want what happened in Houston to be the norm. And that is where you need to that is where everyone needs to come together and figure out what's the best way to prevent that from moving forward. So that's where we stand in the future. I mean, Andrew, we are recording this on the final day of February. Who do you want to see as Utah's next coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and I've had to be persuaded on this a little bit. I'll be honest with you. Like, I follow college basketball really closely. I've seen the alumni hire, Juwan Howard, Chris Mullen, Penny Hardaway, even before this year. A lot of them don't work out. And so, I've been leery about that, but it seems like the most support will go to Alex Jensen as the head coach. If they went in a different direction for like an up and comer, I think Bucky McMillan at Samford is a guy that's interesting, and an immediate marketing push with Bucky Ball, right? And some of these other, coaches in the Big West and the Big Sky that have kind of elevated their program. Steven Smiley in Colorado. One other guy that I think personally is interesting is Jeff Linder, who is an assistant at Texas Tech. He was the head coach at Wyoming. He was the head coach at Weber State for a while. Going and being with Grant McCaslin for a year, who I think is one of the best up-and-coming coaches in college basketball.
I heard that.
That's an interesting, somebody that would be interesting to me. But I think at the end of the day, it's honestly, it's Alex Jensen or bust. Or, we're going to be in a similar situation in terms of support as we've been for the last 4 years. Because Craig was not the guy that a lot of people wanted. They voted with their feet, right, and their money, and here we are.
Yeah, and so you're absolutely right. I would love to see Alex too. If it was Andre Miller, that's another guy I would still be excited about. Feels like we're going to go the Utah route, the Utah man route, but I love the Juwan Howard point. Just because he went there doesn't always mean it works. I think it was Jake Hatch earlier on my show this week brought up Richard Pitino as another guy from New Mexico too. Yeah. I think he's done a good job. He was at Minnesota, it didn't work. It's another really tough place to win at in Minnesota. I love the Gophers, but that's another guy I would look at too. I hope this is an extensive search. I'm totally good if they go with Alex Jensen. I actually think he might even end up being the best hire, but he also hasn't been head coach in a while. So how would that work at the college level? There's definitely questions there. So it's going to be fascinating. But yet we're all excited for the future. There's still the present for the men's and women's program. So we are going to be talking about what we expect for the remainder of the 25 season for Utah in a second. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks has you covered. March basketball is here, and there's no better way to get on the action with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy, it's fun, and it keeps every game exciting. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum. I think he's going to go for more than 29 points, and also, I'm looking at Bam Adebayo. I think he's going to have a big game, go for more than 12 rebounds. Like, I just love how easy and quick it is that I can make those selections. Less than 60 seconds, and they stay engaged all game long. When I win my money, hits my account as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around. Prize Picks even offers weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even more value. You can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps in those spaces. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineups. Head over to Prize Picks, where you can run your game today. All right, Andrew, like we talked about, so much focus is on the future. Still a few games to go on the season. What are you expecting from this team? Because I think that it's going to be something like maybe a 1-3 finish to the year overall. I think they'll probably lose in the first game of the NCAA tournament just because, like, anytime you move on from the coach, I think that I'm just very curious to see how things will get. I think they respect the assistants. I think Ehlert will come in and do a good job. I think they'll still compete hard, but I don't know. I don't really know what the rest of the season is going to yield. So I don't have the highest expectations. I think they're going to be a one and done in the tourney. How do you see the rest of the season playing out for the men's basketball team?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. These are all guys that were bought in to Craig, right? Like, for worse, for all of the issues that the fans and the boosters and the admin had with Craig, he never lost the locker room. And
No.
I think that that's an important distinction when you're talking about, what was the message that was sent, right? Like there were two messages sent. There was a message sent to the fans, which is, hey, we're going to galvanize and rally around a new coach, potentially a Utah man. But in the short-term future with 4 games to go, a game in the Big 12 tournament at least, it was sort of like, yeah, this season doesn't really matter anymore.
Yeah.
And so, how do you get the players motivated to play? That's a tough, that's Josh Eilert's job. That's a tough thing for him. I don't see any possible scenario where they win in Arizona. I think that BYU is going to be out for blood, frankly.
Oh, yes.
After losing in Salt Lake and kind of they're on the rise, and, that's going to be try to embarrass them as much as they can. I think they can beat West Virginia and Arizona State.
Absolutely agree.
Arizona State just kicked off their leading scorer.
That'd be a big win for Eilert, too, knocking them off.
Yeah. So I could see a 2-2 finish, playing on the first day of the Big 12 tournament. And then from there, it's just a matchup thing, neutral court in Kansas City. If you're the 10 seed and you're taking on the 15 or whatever, I think there's a chance they could advance, but it would take some serious rallying by this team. And one thing I've said, kind of all year long on my show is just, they're going to have to do some uncharacteristic things to win some of these games. And it's turnovers and, making free throws, and Gabe's got to get hot and, stuff like that. And so I think I think we're going to kind of sputter to the end of the season, and then we'll see. I think there's a very real possibility of 15 new guys next year.
Oh, I do.
I think, because technically, right, when a coach gets fired, the transfer portal window opens immediately. And so the portal window is open right now for the Utah basketball team, and it's going to extend through the end of the season, or, through the end of the NCAA tournament when it opens for everybody. Hard to imagine some people aren't trying to have those conversations with a Keanu Dawes, with a Jake Walleen, with an Ezra Asar, so.
I totally agree. From one team that's probably going to be sputtering to shining, the women's basketball program. I do think this is a team that's going to make the NCAA tournament. I even think they can win some games in the NCAA tournament. And I think they'll have a chance to win the Big 12 title. I think it'll be tough in their first year, but I do expect them to win some games in that tournament. How do you see their season wrapping up?
Yeah, they got a big one on Wednesday at West Virginia. And if they can get that, so they're sort of in this neck and neck race right now with Oklahoma State for a top 4 seed in the Big 12 tournament, which would give them a double bye if they were able to get it. Now, they don't have the tiebreaker over Oklahoma State because they lost to them at home. But, if they can somehow get even into that 4-5 game, get at least one bye, I think they've certainly got a chance to make some noise in the Big 12 tournament. They've got a turnover problem as well. They really struggle to take care of the ball, win or lose. And so that's something I think Gavin Peterson and his staff need to clean up. But, when you've got Giannia Kneepkins, right, like – that's an ace in the hole right there, and something that can help propel them. I've seen them as like a 6 or a 7 seed in bracketology for the women's tournament, and so depending on kind of who they get matched up against and where that where that all settles, they certainly can win a game or two for sure.
Speaking of ace in the holes, that's what you always are when it comes to basketball for me on this show, my friend. Thank you for making the time to come on, and please let everyone know where they can find more of your stuff.
Yeah, over at Runnin Hoops on all of the socials, and then Runnin Hoops Podcast, wherever you get a podcast. We'll be here for you all, through the end of the year and all off season. I think there's going to be a lot of content that we're going to have. I did an emergency episode last night on on Craig being fired. So go check that out, and all of the other stuff at Runnin Hoops over on X and Instagram and Blue Sky even.
Even Blue Sky. That's everywhere you could be, and it's going to be news everywhere too. There's always this with the transfer portal. You had a coaching hire in, it's going to be very hectic. So make sure you guys head over to the Runnin Hoops Pod today. Andrew, thanks again for coming on.
You bet.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you next week talking more about the ramifications of the firing Craig Smith and Utah football. we're less than 20 days away by the time this show returns from getting the spring ball. So we look forward to catching you all up on the latest news with Utah football then.